Hi, everyone. Welcome to MEDENT Minutes, the podcast that explores EHR optimization and how practices can excel in value based care. I'm Megan Chapman, the Director of Marketing and Communications here at MEDENT, and I am joined today by Suki's Vice President of Partnerships, Heather Miller, and MEDENT Project Manager, Matt Del Favero, as we take a closer look at our AI integration. So, Heather and Matt, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thanks
Yeah,
for
of
having
course.
us.
Excited.
Yeah, so I would like to just start out by briefly reintroducing listeners to our partnership. I know we did a podcast right after our partnership started, and I just wanted to reintroduce anyone who may not be informed about our partnership here. So Matt and Heather, can you tell us a little bit about yourselves and how long we've been partners?
So my name is Matt Del Favero. I'm a project manager here at MEDENT, and we've been working with Suki for almost a year now, and our integration went live earlier this year. Things are going really well with it. A lot of new things are getting added to it, which we'll talk about. But yeah, we our partnership is really good. We're really happy with the way things are going. Really happy with the way the future looks. And Heather, thank you for joining us today to talk about this partnership.
Yeah, of course. Excited to be here. Thanks, Matt. Everyone, I'm Heather Miller, VP of Partnerships and Platform at Suki. I've actually been at Suki for almost 4 years now. Excited to talk again now that we're live. I know we did this when we first kicked off our partnership. And obviously, we've been working together now for a little over a year and went live back in January. And now we're, super excited to just keep iterating on the product so we can meet the needs of your users.
Yeah, for sure. And Matt, let's talk a little bit about Medent's AI journey. I'm curious, why did we want to pursue AI and how did we choose Suki as our partner?
AI is kind of a broad category, but one of the things that was most important was being able to capture the encounter between the patient and the providers. And Suki offered a product that did just that. And we looked at, there are several products out there that do that, and we looked at several of them. The thing that attracted us with Suki was they seem much more advanced than the other ones. They already had some integration built in, whereas a lot of the other ones didn't have that ability available. So they had that ability. They had a lot of the documentation already in place. They were very flexible, willing to work with us and kind of meet the needs of our client base. And they're a well-established company as well. That's the one thing that was important to us was a company that was good to work with, that was established, um, and not just some company. With AI, there's a lot of these companies coming out of seemingly nowhere, and we don't really know their full background. Where Suki was much more established and had a lot of the processes already in place that we needed. So that's ultimately
Yeah.
why we chose to go with them.
And as I understand, there really wasn't a ton of heavy lifting on our side, right? I mean, it just kind of fit right in.
Yeah. Nice thing about the Suki integration was they have their documentation laid out really well, very clear. A lot of there wasn't a lot of programming necessarily on Medent's side that was required. Seems to be Suki's doing a lot of the heavy lifting as far as most of the integration, and we just had to kind of tie into their interface, which, like you said, didn't require too much of a heavy lift.
Yeah, a nice smooth transition, a nice smooth integration and getting things going there. So, Heather, I'm curious, can you tell us a little bit more about Suki from your side and what your mission is with AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like Matt said, we are not new to the industry, to healthcare, to AI. And I think that's super important to think about just when there's a startup or a different company entering, this space it feels like a few minutes. But Since 2017, our vision has stayed consistent. It's always been and always probably will be to make healthcare technology invisible and assistive so that clinicians can focus on what they love most, which is caring for patients. And so we've been building an AI assistant long before LLMs or large language models became a buzzword. We really started by tackling the lowest hanging fruit, which is the clinical note creation. So if you think about that as documentation, that um, creating that note from the patient visit, that was our first skill. And have since we expanding into coding and orders, patient summary. And when you think about Suki platform, so this is the platform that MEDENT embeds into, their product. It's the goal here is to make it seamless for clinicians to get access to the AI, use it, and ensure that the AI is meeting them where they're at versus being, forced upon them. And that's what we really love about the partnership with MEDENT is that, the end user, the clinician is already in the EMR and all they have to do is click a button and start using AI.
Yeah. And I mean, it really says something about Suki. You guys were really proactive with this, your approach with AI. I mean, you were one of the first to do this. It's not like you're a company who, oh, AI is a big buzzword now. Let's try to take advantage of that. I mean, you guys were really at the forefront of this.
Yeah, yeah. And what's I find just super important is the fact that we have always stayed true to our vision. So if you think about Suki AI and our platform, no matter what feature or functionality we're coming out with, and no matter who we're partnering with, we are always grounding in our vision to ensure that we're delivering on that. So, like our partnership with Medent, we are delivering to your clinicians this ability to reduce their administrative burden because they're able to use this technology invisibly and assistive.
Yeah.
And so we've been building this for 7, 8 years now. And it's, as technology improves quickly, I love seeing just how far we continue to go and come out with new skills.
Yeah. And I mean, that completely is in line with our goal too, is to reduce that administrative burden, to make documentation and electronic health records as simple as possible
Mm-hmm.
so that providers can spend more time with their patients. And so I think it just made sense. Our missions really aligned there. And I'm just wondering, Heather, can you actually just share more about the specifics of what our integration has to offer?
Yeah, of course. So when we think about the integration, it's really more than an integration in that your clinicians are able to utilize ambient clinical documentation right within their Medent day-to-day workflow. And so what I mean by that is they're not logging into another system. They're not copying and pasting the output into Medent. They're simply able to go along their day the way they use Medent today and essentially very easily click one button and have the have Suki AI start working for them, start listening to the patient visit and complete that note. Our goal at Suki and obviously working closely with Medent is to ensure that the integration is very seamless. We're very hyper focused on that user experience because it is so important to meet clinicians where they're at. Some clinicians may want, something a little more have more feature rich, which maybe they want to use coding and they want to use multiple languages. Or we have another clinician that doesn't want to do any of that. They just want the output of the note. So we want to meet them where they're at. And we're able to do that with Medent and ensure that it is a assistive feature in their day-to-day work, not a additional feature that they need to use.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's some flexibility there based on,
Mm-hmm.
provider preference, which is great.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we've been partners now for actually about 18 months or so is when we first, started talking about this. And then, of course, we've been live since January. And we've made so many enhancements since then. So I would
Mhm.
like to talk about some of them. So Heather, can you start us out? I want to talk about personalization first, please.
Yeah, I know, right? Personalization. If anyone is using our friends Chat GPT and Gemini, which I use on a regular basis in my day-to-day life, personalization is everything. It's like that next step, right? So we rolled out personalization, which essentially allows clinicians to tailor their notes to their style. So if you think about it, do I do I prefer to be concise and maybe have bullets, or do I want to be very detailed and have a very long narrative? So thinking about how does the clinician want their notes to look like? So with that, we're not only meeting the need of the clinician, but we're also cutting down on any editing that they need to do. And it just makes it feel more natural. Like I'm sure there's, you know, when anyone has used AI, sometimes the output, you're looking at it and you're like, yeah, that does not sound like me. So
Right.
I really want that in whatever email or for a clinician to know. And so our goal is very much to get as close to feeling natural, like I wrote this or I wrote most of it. And yeah, so that's gotten a lot of positive feedback.
Right. And then, of
Uh,
course, another aspect is this you have multilingual support, right?
Yes, and this is super important as we think about all the clinicians, all the patients' families. Not everyone is speaking English, and we want to make sure that we are meeting them where they're at. And so we have about 80 or so languages. The visit, it's not anything extra, that the doctor or clinician needs to do. We just listen to that visit. The patient could be speaking in one language, and the doctor could speaking in English or speaking in that patient's language. And Suki's going to actually produce that note in English because we do know when it goes back to MEDENT or any EHR, it needs to be in English. So we always convert it back for you. But it allows the patient to speak freely and not worry about having to translate.
Yeah, it helps really with any language barriers that might be there.
Yep.
So I think that's fantastic too. And before we move on to some of these other enhancements, I'm curious. Matt, was personalization, note personalization, something that our clients were really interested in, and what kind of feedback have we had so far?
Yeah, so since the beginning, that was something that people were looking for. A lot of them wanted the bulleted notes. A lot of them find that just easier to read, and if somebody else is reading it, it's easier to read and understand. So things like that were really important, as well as the verbosity, where you can set it to have as little text as possible or as much as you want. I think there's 3 levels of it, and having those options, those were basically from day one things people were looking for, and having Suki listen to what people wanted and implement those and do it in such a nice way that it just shows how well Suki um, is handling everything as far as listening to clients, taking that feedback, and implementing what clients are looking for. And so having that is just, again, is people were asking since day one, they were asking for it. They have it now. They did a great job of implementing it, and the the response has been overwhelmingly positive, being able to personalize their notes.
Yeah, and they've made it very simple to do that as well. When you just go to the settings portion of that Suki screen, and it's very simple to get your settings taken care of.
Yeah,
So I think that was fantastic too. It just shows how dedicated Suki is to listening to that feedback and getting it implemented in a really surprisingly and impressively quick way. Um,
yeah.
Yeah, we've
Yeah.
introduced so much, and another thing that I wanted to mention was this introduction of evidence linking as well. I would love Heather to speak about evidence linking because not only are you able to personalize that note and get these, if you prefer bullets, you can have bulleted information, but that bulleted information is actually linked now to evidence in the transcript. So, Heather, can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you did a great job of explaining it for me. As in, it is exactly what we named it, which every line of the note is going to be tied to supporting data in that visit transcript. But think about it more like a citation in a research paper. So, you look at that research paper and you can see where the author got some of their facts, right? So it's like fact checking. And so we introduce it because we want to have that fact checking for our note so that if the clinician is wondering why we had an output about diabetes, it'll go into the transcript and say where the patient spoke about diabetes or the clinician spoke about diabetes. But with all that said, what does that actually mean? Like, what is the benefit? Because, the goal here is not to have our clinicians going through looking for citations. What it means is we're just increasing the accuracy of the output. So this also means it's going to be better organized in the note, and just gives the clinician a little more transparency as we're building that trust. And so that is really the thing to kind of think about with evidence linking is it's about increased accuracy, better organization, and increasing the trust of the clinician.
Yeah, I mean, that transparency, I have a background in marketing and journalism, and like you said, with the citations, it made me very excited to hear about this evidence linking because you might look at something and say, you might question it or have a concern, and it gives, like
Absolutely.
you said, it just makes that more reliable, knowing that it's linked to the transcript itself,
Yep.
which is fantastic. I know we've also actually added some LOINC codes as well, like development history, I believe, for pediatrics. And I'm wondering, why are these so important?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about LOIN codes, think about them as the back end code to a specific section or grouping of content. So like we just added development history for pediatrics. And this is so important because this is actually helping prompt our AI looking for patients' developmental history, everything from early milestones to social and language development. It's capturing all that information in a standardized way so that every provider has that same full picture. So if you think about what we talked about before with increasing accuracy, increasing robustness, and organization, these LOIN codes really help organize that note output that's going to the clinician. So as we add more and more LOIN codes, which, by the way, it is from getting feedback from your end users also, uh, it's going to help organize the content that's coming out in that note. So now there's all this specific information organized into one section about the developmental history for that pediatric patient.
Great. And Matt, I'm just curious, what has the feedback been for, um, LOINC codes and the evidence linking as well?
Yeah, it's all really great, and I think also what it does is in this age of interoperability, being able to share data, having LOIN codes, which are standard across the industry, having things like that just makes interoperability much more manageable. So if it comes down to, you're sharing data with another client, uh, things like that make that possible. Whereas if you don't implement things like LOIN codes and of course Suki also has the diagnosis codes, having that codification really makes interoperability so much easier and better and more accurate. Whereas if you just had, just kind of a blob of text that didn't have any codes associated with it, that makes it much more difficult. So I got to give props to Suki for understanding that things like that are important and implementing the codes. And I from my understanding, there's going to be more of that down the road.
Yeah. And Heather, I mean, one thing to take away from all of this is that Suki takes note quality very seriously. And I wanted to touch on the specialty selection options and how that can actually improve the quality of your notes. So do you
Yeah,
have any tips on that?
oh yeah. Oh yeah. Quality, when we talk about the trust that we're working to gain from the clinician, that really roots in the quality of the output. And so it is foundational to Suki's work and philosophy with AI. We have to get it right. And one thing that we look at quality from the perspective that it's a journey. Quality is not a destination. And I say that because AI, which is super cool, is always learning. So it is a journey. And the more context and feedback it gets, the more accurate and personalized to the user it becomes. So when we generate a note, it's not simply based on that encounter patient visit audio. So signals that we take in to produce that note includes things like patient's age, the type of visit, like am I a pediatric patient? Am I an adult patient? What is the chief complaint? And specifically the clinician's specialty. So this is so important because, a clinician's specialty will actually prompt and focus the content that we're gonna give back to that user. So an example is like, or an orthopedic surgeon is going to have a very different scope, different meds, different procedures than say a psychiatrist visit. I mean, think about it. An argument I had likely like just this morning with my moody teenager daughter, who I adore, but she is a teenager, is not really relevant to my orthopedic appointment that I'm having, but it is very relevant to my therapist visit.
Yes.
So it's super important to be including that specialty. And then on top of that, we anchor all of this information in general medical guidelines. So we are a healthcare only company. Our ASR, which is what translates audio to speech, is our own, and it's based in medical terminology. And so when you think about it, all of this is like so important, all these different signals. But one of the most important signals to us is that this will get better over time with feedback. So that feedback that your end users are giving us is so important. That partnership that MEDENT has with their clinicians is so important because every bit of feedback helps us get better.
Yeah. And how can users provide feedback?
Good question. So in one of our feature releases, we, with the help of MEDENT, put out a new in-app rating. So right when the clinician is working and having that patient visit, they have the option to give instant feedback. So you can do a star rating. Obviously, the more information you put into the note, into that box that's a free form text, that's going to help us fine tune that accuracy and note quality even further. And the reason being is if you do it in that specific note, we're able to understand what the audio was, the transcript, and really tie it back to how do we get better. And it allows us to really address like these nuances or unique concerns that may be specific to your field. So if you think about AI, I know I keep saying this, it's always learning. So AI is just like a personal trainer. The more consistently you show up, you provide feedback, you adjust based on that feedback, the stronger and more tailored your results are going to become. And that's exactly AI with Suki. We will take that feedback, use it, and adapt to your unique style. And it's only going to get better.
And Matt, can you tell, just give us a little bit of a visual of where, this is after the note has concluded, right? And I believe it's, the bottom portion of the Suki window where you can leave that rating and provide that feedback. Is that correct?
That's correct. So once you create the note, you've had your visit, and then Suki generates the note, and you're reviewing the note within the Suki window. At the bottom of that, you're going to find a 5-star rating option. And once you select a star rating, 1 through 5, the text box appears, and that's what Heather was saying, where you can type in the explanation. This looks good, or this didn't come out right. Whatever the case is, whatever the issue was, you can put that in that box, and once you submit it, Suki will receive all that information.
Yeah. And I think that there's two prongs to this is that, one, it streamlines that feedback. There's no need to, go into MEDENT support or, and contact us, let us know something went wrong with this note, and then we have to contact Suki and, try to figure out which note it was. I mean, it streamlines this whole process because that rating is attached to that particular note. And I think the other prong here is that it's important not to just report what went wrong. I think if you have a really positive experience, it can be very beneficial for Suki and Medent to know that that was a positive experience so we can see what we're doing right as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was super excited about this rating feature as well because I think the more we can streamline this feedback, the quicker and more accurate we can be with continuing to tailor this. Just like Heather said, AI is always learning, and so are we. So, let us know what we're doing right. Let us know what we can improve. But we really, as a whole, thrive on that feedback. So
And,
I'm curious. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was going to say that no, and to your point, that's absolutely correct, in that the provider is looking at the note at that time. They're able to see, hey, whether it's good or bad, or indifferent. It's if there's something in there that they want to report, they're looking at the note at that time. And to your point about when they submit it, it's going right to Suki. It's specific to that note. They can see all the details of that note right from there, rather than kind of like sending in a support ticket and saying, on this patient, this happened at this time. Okay, well, which note was it? There's a lot of research that would have to be done with that. Whereas this process just like you said, streamlines it so well that I think it's such a great enhancement. I was happy to see that Suki implemented that.
Yeah. And sometimes all we hear is the bad stuff. And I mean that's important, but that I just wanted to highlight we like hearing the good stuff too, because that's just as important, I think, is knowing what we're doing right. And then knowing how we can make other things better as well. So I think it's super important we get that feedback. So if you're using Suki and you're listening, I hope you're excited as I am about that. But I am curious to know what is next on our roadmap here. So Heather, can you let us know what we're looking at in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, huge kudos to you for bringing up the good and the bad, because the good feedback is just as valuable. So another plug on all feedback is used. And so, yes, we would love, love, love more feedback. But when we think about what's next, it's really about building out these skills, these assistive type skills outside of documentation. So one exciting capability coming is order staging. So clinicians will be able to generate the prescription order directly from their ambient session. So we'll capture, what the clinician and the patient are talking about. We'll stage the order and send it directly to MEDENT. and then it'll go into MEDENT as a staged order that you'll need to review and sign for, obviously. But to Matt's point with making this is like easy as possible on the clinician, like this is a perfect example of a skill that's simple, it's intuitive, and we're here to reduce clicks and reduce that administrative burden. Of course, we're continuing to refine all of our existing features, like note quality. I said it's a journey. It is a constant journey we are always focused on, enhancing ease of use, expanding specialties, and making it more personalized. So we did come out with our first, version of personalization. We're only going to come out with more.
Yeah. And Matt, I wanted to also highlight one of our recent changes in MEDENT was the Suki button changing color based on the status of the document and the Suki note. So could you talk a little bit about that and also give folks a sneak peek at what's coming in Chart Central?
Sure. Yeah. So another feedback item, just to kind of give an example of why this was necessary. What we found was a lot of providers are having their nurses start the note using Suki, which is great. So the nurse will have the encounter with the patient and use Suki for that. And then the provider will then, when meeting with the patient, will also start Suki. It's called reambient. So it's basically the same note. They're just clicking it, and the information that the doctor does, or I should say, the encounter that the doctor has with the patient merges with the encounter that the nurse had with the patient. So it all becomes one note, and ambient allows for that. What we found was that the provider wouldn't always know if the nurse had actually used Suki or not. And because of that, what we did was we implemented, did some programming where the button would change color. So if the nurse did the note using Suki, when the provider went into that note in MEDENT, the color would indicate if the note was done using Suki. So they know, okay, now I go into Suki and I'm just going to go into the existing note in Suki rather than creating a whole new note. And that just kind of makes it so they can see as soon as they go in the note, do I have to start a whole new Suki note, or do I go into the existing Suki note, and click the button, do reambient, things like that. As part of that, that's already been implemented. We already have that in place. What we're working on right now is to have a feature like that in Chart Central. So you'll be able to see that right in Chart Central. Right now, if you can start a progress note, you'll see it's an icon that's just a plus. That's an image of a plus sign, and you click that to start the progress note. That becomes a feather, and the color of the feather changes based on the status of the progress note. What we're doing is adding on to that, where if a Suki note was done, you'll see a Suki microphone icon on there, and the color of that icon will be consistent with the color of the button, the Suki button in the note. So you can see right from Chart Central, which, as we know, a lot of people use to keep track of where patients are, what the status is, are they in the room, things like that. They'll be able to see right from there, looks like the nurse did their Suki note. Now I can, like I said before, just go into the existing Suki note, do the reambient rather than starting a whole new note. So it just kind of gives everybody the information up front rather than having to go into Suki and see if they've actually created the note or not.
Yeah. And I mean, it's in real time.
Yep.
That's and can you talk, what are the colors that people should be looking out for?
So there's orange and red. And so the orange will indicate that somebody has launched a session using Suki, meaning that the ambient session is happening. And then the red indicates that the note was generated by Suki. And then it'll be blue green to indicate that the note had been imported into MEDENT. So based on those colors, you'll know exactly what the status of that Suki note is.
Wonderful. And so, Heather, just to kind of close out the conversation, just talk a little bit more about that shared vision and what we can expect.
Yeah, absolutely. Our shared vision with Suki and MEDENT is ultimately to continuously reduce administrative burden while empowering our clinicians to do what they do best, which is care for patients. I know our mission and vision with MEDENT line up very well, and that is exactly what our roadmap and what we're working on in the future to deliver on, is to really empower these clinicians to focus on patients and not be focused on all their administrative burden that has been put on them.
Great. Well, thank you both for joining us today. I think this was such an amazing conversation, and I am so looking forward to the next one and seeing what we do next. So thank you again, and I just hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
You too. Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.